Susan Euler. In the early days of the 20th century, Russian art was the most avant-garde in the world. In fact, Russian artist Kazimir Malevich created the first geometric, non-objective work. And here it is. Russian abstraction was closely tied to the ideals of the Russian Revolution. Although some may remember the Russian Revolution as one massive coordinated event, it was actually a series of events that grew out of civil and social unrest that had been spreading throughout the Russian Empire since the mid to late 19th century. The first Russian Revolution was the Revolution of 1905, which included worker strikes and peasant revolts. It resulted in some important constitutional reforms, and it also set the stage for the Revolution of 1917, the so-called Bolshevik Revolution. The Tsar was overthrown in March 1917, and in November, the Bolsheviks assumed power under the leadership of Vladimir Lenin. But getting back to art, the purpose of this program is not to discuss the many complex social and political issues surrounding the Russian Revolution. However, this was the world in which these artists lived, and it shaped their art. Not that all these artists were necessarily militant communists, far from it. But at the core of their expression was the desire to throw off the past and create a new art style that represented the experiences of modern life. This, in some cases, included events related to the Russian Revolution and to subsequent communist political and social reforms, but not always. For people who had suffered generations of hardship and repression under Tsarist rule, the new communist regime did promise a new and better life. Some artists believed that their artworks would further this cause by inspiring people to rebuild a more just, prosperous, and egalitarian society. To that end, Vavara Stepanova created modernist textiles and practical, comfortable sportswear, and Kazimir Malevich designed ceramics with bold geometric designs that stood in stark contrast to the elaborate, fussy ceramic decorations of more traditional styles popular at the time. In the minds of these and other artists, this was how citizens of the new Russia would live. They would wear practical, well-designed clothes and brew tea in teapots featuring the most modern abstract designs. Even street signs and billboards would be boldly modern. But that's not the entire story. The concept of being modern was more than just abstract designs on dishware, comfortable gym clothes, and artistic billboards. Modernism meant an entirely new way of life. This was not just an idea Russian artists came up with as a way of furthering the cause of the revolution. Contemporary art movements such as Fauvism in France, which was introduced in 1905, German Expressionism, which was introduced in 1905 as well, and Cubism, which began in 1907 following Picasso's landmark painting Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, which was also aimed, in part, at expressing the realities of life in the new, modern era of the 20th century, a century that would not be tied to the realist styles that had dominated Western art since the Renaissance. All this importance placed on modernism may be difficult for us to understand in the 21st century, because for us, things have always been modern. Here are some common objects from the 2020s, all things we use all the time. Going back 50 years to the 1970s, we find less modern versions of the same items. In fact, the basic design of the jet airplane has not really changed in 50 years, as this ad from 1974 illustrates. The typewriter even has the same keyboard as the laptop. So, although these items from 50 years ago might look somewhat clunky and certainly lack some of the things we expect today, such as internet access, they are still modern. Going back another 50 years to the time of the Russian Revolution, the items do look different, but it's been 100 years or more since they were made. But even though these items are very old-fashioned, they still are basically the same as those we use today. Same keyboard on the typewriter, same electric plug on the coffee maker, same vacuum suction action with the vacuum cleaner. And we could drive the car if we wanted to. Now, let's go back another 50 years to the 1870s, 47 years before the Russian Revolution. Wait, this is a blank slide. That's because in 1870, None of the items we have just been discussing existed. There were no cars, no airplanes, no telephones, no electric vacuum cleaners, no electric coffee makers, no electricity. And there were not even any typewriters. Not in Russia, not anywhere. As my mom used to say, it was a different world, a really different world. Although the Russian Modernists did not necessarily all think alike and worked in different styles and had different viewpoints about art, politics, and society in general, they also had a lot in common. Their art was very abstract. Some of it was even non-objective, with no reference to visual reality. Artists also used highly saturated colors and bold geometric shapes. Some used cubist faceting, and all of them celebrated modern life. One of the earliest of the organized Russian art movements, and one of the most radical and influential in terms of abstraction, was Suprematism, begun by Kazimir Malevich in 1913. The name derived from Malevich's view that suprematist art would be superior to all art of the past, and in his words, would lead to the supremacy of pure feeling or perception in the visual arts. He was heavily influenced by avant-garde poets and playwrights, and his innovative costume and set designs for the opera Victory Over the Sun led directly to his painting of Black Square on a white ground. In fact, it was the backdrops that he designed for Victory Over the Sun that inspired him to create Black Square. Malevich wrote, "When in 1913, in a desperate attempt to rid art of the ballast of objectivity, I took refuge in the form of the square, the critics, and with them society, sighed. All that we have loved has been lost. We are in a desert. Before us stands a black square on a white ground. But the desert is filled with the spirit of non-objective feeling that penetrates everything." Malevich's art had a strong spiritual component, which caused friction with artists who argued that art should serve a social and political purpose. But he was also widely admired for how his paintings made a break with the past and moved away from the idea that art had to represent natural forms, that is, had to be based in visual reality. Suprematism paved the way for much of 20th century geometric abstraction, including that of the American abstract expressionists. Russian Constructivism began in 1914, 4 years before the Russian Revolution. It quickly became a very influential style both in Russia and internationally, attracting artists working in a wide range of media, including painting, sculpture, graphic design, and photography. For example, Alexander Rodchenko's dynamic constructivist posters and cover designs changed the look of modern graphic design. This poster, done in the early 1920s, is perhaps the most well-known graphic image to come out of the Russian Modernist period. Many assume the woman is shouting a Bolshevik slogan. Actually, she is saying, "Books in all branches of knowledge." The poster is an ad for a publishing house. The founder of the Constructivist movement was Vladimir Tatlin. In 1914, Tatlin visited Picasso in Paris, where he saw Picasso's three-dimensional cubist constructions made of scrap materials, such as cardboard. Back in Russia, Tatlin began making his own constructions out of modern industrial materials such as glass, metal, and wire. As an industrial designer and architect, he hoped that his understanding of modern materials would generate new ideas that could be used in mass production and ultimately serve the ends of the Russian Communist Party. Tatlin's best-known work is the monument to the Third Communist International, a model for the headquarters of the Comintern, an association of communist parties from throughout the world. The Comintern was founded by Lenin in 1919. Tatlin's concept was to use geometrically shaped units of steel and glass attached to a spiral steel frame to create a huge rotating conference center and radio broadcast tower. The completed building was to be taller than the Eiffel Tower. The epitome of modern engineering, it was designed to demonstrate to the world the glorious new life made possible under communism. But it was never built. In fact, it probably could never have been built because it really is not a building, but a gigantic constructivist sculpture. Smaller scale modern reconstructions and computer-generated images show how it might have looked. The original model was dismantled and is only known from photographs. But alas, in 1924 Lenin died and Stalin came to power. Stalin believed that art must be realistic and easily understandable to the average person. Non-objective paintings and sculptures were banned, and artists who did not comply were persecuted. Ironically, perhaps, graphics featuring bold geometric forms, strong colors, and simplified shapes derived from Suprematism and Constructivism became the accepted Soviet style, a style still widely used today. For the 10-Minute Professor, this is Dr. Susan Ray Hewlett. Thanks for tuning in.